Welcome back to Inspiring Generations. I'm your host, Celeste Williams. As you notice, I did the show last year with a mask because we had COVID for 2 years. So welcome to my face. You finally get to see my face. And my guest today and we're going to be talking about women in history that suffered from mental health. We're just carrying the conversation, continuing it for people out there who are going through mental health. We want to keep the conversation going. We want to talk about the important things and how we can help each other to get through mental health. So I want to welcome my first guest today. Grace McKinnon is back. She's been a guest on my show before. I had her on for Black History Month 2021. We didn't get to do anything this year because the theme was wrapped around...
The Black History theme was.
Yeah, the theme was.
Yeah.
Wrapped around mental health and wellness in the Black community, not only in the Black community, the Black and Brown community, but I think overall, every nationality, every race, someone suffers from mental health or mental illness or mental disorders, whatever you want to call it, whatever you can relate to. We're about to get into the conversation. So Grace, welcome, and thank you for coming back and joining me for this conversation.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to come back and broaden the discussion we started last year. So
Yeah.
I enjoy the invitation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Grace, I thought of you coming back for this episode for the simple fact that I've seen you mentor people that were,
Facing mental health challenges?
well, that, and also substance abuse, right? And the question I wanted to ask you, out of many questions, is do you think that substance abuse can lead to mental health disorders?
I think they're tied together. Usually people are in pain. When they're in pain, they seek some kind of relief. And not infrequently, they turn to substances and activities that may not in the long term be in their best interest. So there's a category of service called dual diagnosed populations, and they have substance abuse plus mental health illnesses or challenges. So yeah, it's a compelling situation. It's a lot of ground to cover.
Do you think that it's an ongoing crisis in our country?
It's a documented crisis in this country, and it's an intergenerational crisis. Throughout the 20th century, we've seen escalating levels of involvement, destruction, impact on families with substance abuse histories. So it's not likely to end anytime soon. So how we respond really matters. We have to start by acknowledging the situation within our community. And like you said earlier, all communities, up and down, no matter religion, race, creed, color, nationality, all are impacted in the global challenge we have with substance abuse and mental health.
Right. And a big disclaimer, Grace and I aren't psychiatrists. We aren't counselors. Grace has worked in the field of
I work as an advocate. And my advocacy involves community mental health, civil rights, family and youth services, because they're all interrelated.
Okay. And my situation right now is that because I went to school for family and community systems, which is the long name for social work. And now I'm going to get personal because it's something that, someone out there can relate to that I've been going through. It's depression, but clinical depression. But when I was diagnosed with depression, I didn't know what kind of depression it was, because there are 200, or maybe more. But when I did my research, it was 200 mental health illnesses and disorders. And I cannot name them all, but I'll name a few. A few of them would be PTSD, bipolar, Alzheimer's, dementia, bipolar disorder. And we're going to get into a conversation about someone in history, a woman, because this is Women's Month. So we want to highlight women, strong women, who you wouldn't think had mental health at all, any mental health issues. And we're going to go back into the 60s right now. We're going to go back into history. And we're going to talk about Miss Jacqueline Kennedy and Coretta Scott King. What did they go through? What were they diagnosed with? And is it because they had money to get treated for their mental health illnesses? It wasn't public. I mean, it is public now, but back then it was a big stigma on mental health. To say you had mental health would mean that you were shunned in your community, you lost your job, your children would go to school and people would bully them and pick on them because your parent is crazy. You know, these were the names that they had for mental illnesses, just that someone was just crazy.
Yeah.
You know, it couldn't have been any trauma or anything that they went through that caused these things. But like I said, we're going to get into some history parts of people who suffered from mental illness, and then we'll come up to the time where we are now dealing with mental health and COVID.
Yeah.
But right now we want to talk about Jacqueline Kennedy.
Yes. I like that you selected Jacqueline Kennedy and Coretta Scott King, because these ladies were emblematic. They were icons, bigger than life, globally. They presented an image of what women were supposed to be. It was very idealized. I'm a baby boomer. I was a little kid in the 60s, and the civil rights, I'm a civil rights baby. You know, for black people, we were training our children to go forward and fight for civil rights, putting them right on the line. And the parents were really committed to teaching children how to not only endure, not only to survive, but to thrive and aspire in their life choices. And they would cite Coretta Scott King and Jacqueline Kennedy, especially for me as a female, to say, that's a lady, okay? This is how she carries herself. With all the tragedies and challenges, you need to use that model on how you will behave as you, as a little 8, 9-year-old black girl, go into schools, the one little raisin in the oatmeal, and all these challenges come to you. Keep in mind, this is the standard of conduct. Okay, so there's a lot of attention to front, and people were minimizing the back. Okay, the challenges that Jackie Kennedy faced and Coretta Scott King faced, they announced in their later memoirs and the autobiographies, and all the other journalists coming in and investigating their lives. You know, Jackie Kennedy had multiple issues with reproductive problems. She had stillborn, she had miscarriage, she had the deaths of her husband and her brother-in-law, she had an absent father. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Coretta Scott King appeared to be more socially able. She was from the black, upper middle class, well-educated. Generations within her family had been college educated. She was a pianist, accomplished in her own right. But in her marriage, she assumed the role of the helpmate, as Jackie Kennedy did in her marriage. Okay, the roles of women, that was the idealized role. You are a helpmate too. Okay, and that kind of chokes down on people sometimes. Not everyone does well in harness or be in a permanent segment.
Right.
So for me, as a child of the 50s and the 60s, I found that model hard to take. I was technically doing the right things. I was a nice little colored girl well-spoken, well-mannered, quiet. Coretta would have been proud of me.
Yeah.
But in my own head, in my own heart, there were challenges.
Yeah.
You know, so the roles that people assign us are probably meant to help us and figure out how to fit into society. But if those roles are chafing you, if they feel too tight, you know, I think it's hard for people to entitle themselves to say no, step back, take a look, acknowledge your distress, and then go forward to explore and find what works for you. I was a bookworm. I read and researched and tried all kinds of techniques and self-help books and therapies. I was trained as a peer counselor. You know, I had lots and lots of resources because the people around me believed in me. But if you don't have people who believe in you, you need to believe in yourself.
That's a great, great inspirational thought right there. And we're going to hold that because this is Inspiring Generations.
It is.
And we aim to inspire, you know, and we want to inspire people right now, if you're watching this episode, to look inside yourself, do a self-inventory, and try to understand that women in the past had to be strong, like Miss Grace said. The stigma that Jackie Kennedy would have got if she came out with letting the world know I have post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what PTSD is. And our soldiers in Vietnam, in the same time, was coming back with this PTSD.
And the civil rights workers and all the people who had gender identity issues who started to come forward and said, you know, playing roles is not working for me.
Right.
You know.
So they looked at her as a strength, like you said. She had to be strong for a whole nation. You know, she was the mother of strength. Do you think if she was a poor woman that she would have got the help that she got?
No. It was very clear in the 60s that, number one, it was a rare thing to acknowledge mental health issues. And then when you went to get services, the services were very spotty and very stratified. If you had money, you can get anything. If you don't have money, the services were poor quality state institutions and the streets.
Yeah.
Okay. So most definitely Jackie's life was challenged, but she had the advantage of being able to get better quality care than most citizens.
And we're still in history, okay? So we want to do the contrast between Jackie in the car with her husband. Boom. That's traumatizing.
Yes.
Coretta Scott King wasn't in the same room or on that balcony with Dr. Martin Luther King. Two different situations of
But
being
the same loss.
with the same loss and the same trauma of trying to deal with it. Right? It doesn't matter how it happened.
Yeah. And you can go forward in history if you're looking for big female icons, Princess Diana.
Yes.
You know, for another generation, that would be their reference.
Yes.
Every generation has its own context. You know, if you're a millennium, the generational trauma might be the bombing of the World Trade Center.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right.
In this generation, COVID.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And one of the points I wanted to make is that it's incumbent upon each generation to teach the next how to survive. What are their techniques? What are the resources? What is the messaging that needs to happen so that you too, in the current generation, can know that you can survive. This too shall pass. And that how we survive and how we thrive is by each one, teach one, to borrow a phrase from the 70s.
Okay, so each generation has gone through some type of trauma.
Yes.
Is generational.
Yes.
Generational trauma passed down from
Well,
in
you know,
families.
There's a lot of theories about it. I mean, I think the simple common sense answer is, how could I be in a family where there's stress and dysfunction and all kinds of things going on and not see it and not be impacted by it? How could I not use it as a follow this path or don't follow this path? You know. So for me, that's the simple answer. It's a decision we have to make as we decide how to build our own futures, you know. So I would say yes.
Okay, because at some point, when you're a child, does mental health illness look the same as it would in an older person?
Well, you may not recognize crazy as crazy when you're young. If you've always grown up with it, it's just the way of the people around you. You know, it's just the way you are. And you need to have it brought to your attention.
Right.
Sometimes it's distance that brings it to your attention.
Okay.
You move away from the family, or you age up and you're on your own, and you stop and reflect and, whoa, that was kind of wild, strange.
Yeah.
But even if we recognize our situations as being a little off the beaten path, we don't necessarily see it as so deficient that it needs professional care. Okay, so that's why I think talking helps.
Yeah.
The community needs to announce these issues and talk about them openly instead of hiding them behind closed doors.
Right. So we move on, and you know, like you said, one
It's a
generation.
big topic.
Yeah, it's huge, and the conversation is going to keep going because our community much needs that. Because especially that we are a community, a small community
In Chelsea.
in Chelsea, Chelsea, Massachusetts, small community. And when I first came here, there were generational trauma that I was dealing with. And I'm going to put myself out there because to tell the truth, it sets you free. And I feel free. And so I'm going to talk about it. When I first came here, I didn't know that I suffered from depression. I was away from my family. They were here. I was in another place. By this time, I'm growing into an adult. I had my first child. Things weren't going right. Because when you're a woman, like when you're a young girl, your mind is set that I'm going to get married, then I'm going to have the children.
Your prince will come.
In the 60s, you weren't trained to like, you're going to have the job first, even though women were going into the workforce. You know, women's place was more of home, taking care of the children, making sure their husbands were okay because they were the breadwinners.
Caretakers.
Right. Now you come into my generation and women are being productive and they...
All women are productive. Let's correct that.
No, I said not all.
Yeah.
I said women.
Yeah, okay, but
Some women.
if you're a housewife or if you're an executive,
Yeah, you're still
both productive.
You're still
Yeah,
productive.
you're both
It's a job,
productive.
right?
Yeah.
Women, we have a heavy job. So you dream of those things and then they don't work out. That can be traumatizing in itself. Because we have this picket fence, we have this
image
of what a family should look like. That can be damaging in itself because now you have to get your mindset ready to say, I'm going to be a single parent. Whoever heard of that? That's the way I was thinking. That's not possible. The women that I see in my family, the women that are raising me, are not single. They had husbands. Some of them, their husbands abused them, and they didn't leave them. These were the images of some women I had. You know, there was a woman in my family, one of my uncles, I'm not going to say his name. My father had 5 brothers. Not all of them were abusive, but this one was. And he was in the military. And he used to come home off a leave. And this woman was the nicest woman, and I love her. And I still do to today, even though she has passed, rest in peace on death. He beat her.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Multiple times. And I'm a little 7-year-old, wondering, how could a 7-year-old have the mind to say, why don't you leave him if he keeps treating you bad? I'm saying this as a 7-year-old. She's saying to me as an adult, I love him. He's going to change. He's going to get better. Well, after all those beatings and abuse, she became abusive. She became so mentally ill that she had to be institutionalized.
Well, there are heavy consequences to prolonged exposure to abuse. In that story, we have the innocence of a child recognizing a dangerous situation. We have the denial of adults in the situation, justifying it by idealized references to love, marriage, duty, whatever. And then you have the habitual reinforcement of a man who's being taught to hyper-masculinize.
Yeah.
And
so now I grow up, right?
There's the change.
So now I grow up thinking that this is normal. I'm going to let some guy abuse me, and I'm going to go back tomorrow. And I did. I did. But that's where my mental health started. That's where the depression started. I wouldn't want to talk to anybody about it, about the abuse. So that set in for me. I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be social. Because to be social, your friends are not knowing, and then you can't talk about it. Like I said, coming up in the 60s was stigmatized mental health.
Yeah.
Now we're going through COVID, right? 2 years of it. We're wearing a mask. We can't see our family. We're still here today having that conversation, right? Because we're just opening up now.
Well, it's very brave of you to share your story. Unfortunately, that story is a common thread that goes throughout the history of women. Because of women's place at the center of the family, being responsible for procreation, being responsible for child rearing, being responsible for the care of the elders, it's burdensome and challenging to complain, because on the one hand, we're being told it's an idealized role, and on the other hand, we're having the work that it takes to get that done dismissed and minimized.
Right.
So how does a healthy ego balance all that out?
Right.
And keep integrity with the self?
Yes.
So it sounds like you've been on quite a journey.
Yes, and to get services, because I'm not a rich woman. So back then to get services, I could not get any. So self-medication
Oh, okay.
was my road.
There's the dragon.
I'm not afraid to talk about it. That was my road. And when self-medication wasn't working anymore, I started seeking help. And I couldn't get any services. I'm going to say it again. I couldn't get them. So what I did was take drug counseling for 6 months.
Okay.
And the counselor that I had actually was a recovering addict themselves. And I said, this is great. Because everybody that tried to counsel me that was sober, they just wasn't getting it. Until I got this one person that was, like I said, transitioning from that life, went to school and became a counselor, not a psychiatrist, a counselor, but he helped me work through those stepping stones of wellness.
And there's a lot of that in the mental health community when the industry realized that there's a level of care, like you said, a transition that needs to happen that can't be satisfied the same way with a psychiatrist or a psychologist. They all have their place in the system of care, but the development of peer counseling, drug counseling, advocacy by people in transition. That is when I came into the story. That was my entry into mental health issues. And that's how I became a mental health advocate. I didn't have drug issues. That wasn't my entry. It was seeing that we need to put more hands to this work. And people who are good listeners, who can be empathetic, who can be clear about helping others draw boundaries, they were needed.
Yeah.
And so that's why I joined. And eventually became director of a board of mental health, and was pleased to help create more mental health facilities, some of which are available to you in Chelsea.
Yeah. There's resources out there.
I'm glad that you got access to the resources that
that
you
was the
needed.
first stepping stone. Because like you said, it's transitioning. But now I want to mimic. Now I want to mimic my counselor.
Okay.
So I enroll at Cambridge College.
Okay.
And I want to know more about this counseling thing, right? So I take the class to be a social worker.
Okay.
That was my major. That was going to be my career. But at the same time, I just finished a nursing program, and I'm helping elders with dementia, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And these disorders were different from just the clinical depression that I was seeing. And I used to say to myself, if this is what I'm trying to get over this now, and this is what I got to look forward to when I get older, we don't want to go back down that road.
The world is full of challenges. They're not all going to land in your lap.
So let's try to keep it healthy, you know? Let's try to keep our situation healthy. Let's try to go and inspire others. If you are a person that's cognitive and well, and you know that there's many disorders out there that people are dealing with, try to have some sympathy. Try to find connections. But I would say the number one thing that worked for me, and I want to send this words of inspiration, was getting in touch with myself. Learning how to reinvent myself to enter into society again and be a productive human being so that I can help others. And so that's my mission now. To be honest about what I've gone through, and I'm going to keep that conversation going, because what I've gone through and what those women in the past went through to stay strong, there are women still doing that.
Yeah.
And there's no stigma as strong as it was back then, today. I mean, it's still
There's
less stigma, because it's still stigma surrounded by it, right?
Yeah, and I would like to add that one of the biggest resources that we can offer as individuals is to be a good listening ear.
Yeah.
People really want to be heard.
Right.
And that's a skill set that is special and unique, and it does not require a degree.
Right.
If you can offer a listening ear to someone in distress, right now we're talking about Women's History Month,
Right.
but I don't think it's polarized, men against women. If you can help that woman share her story, okay, connect to the resources that she needs to advance herself and her life goals, please do.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You will benefit from the offer. Okay. You will share in the joy of achievement. You'll also share in the heartache, but it's split in half when there are two people involved, hopefully. All these concerns are universal.
I'm sorry, I have to tap my chest on that, but I'm sorry. Listen, I knew I had the right guest for this topic. And I know many other people, to keep this conversation going.
Yes.
CCTV has been so good last year to us. We were on a roll.
Yes.
And I want to tell you, my biggest fear was taking off this mask. Okay, because I used to have so much issues with taking pictures. and being on camera. I had to muster up the courage. And the way I did that was I took a class with Ricky Velez here at CZTV. And that was the first time that I graduated from anything in a long time. So I was so excited that I learned about the tripod, the camera, how that was working. They have new ones since then. So I might have to take another class. But it gave me enough courage to do this, what I'm doing.
Well, I like that you referenced taking off the mask, because we have to unmask all of our fears and issues around mental health. We have to unmask the hidden history of women. You know, we also need to know that one of the reasons I wear this amulet for this show is because it passes from generation to generation. It always comes down to you need a critical mass of people to come together and commit to make a change. You know, so there's room for everybody. They can all have a seat at the table. And when you sit and have conversations like this, you invite your audience to reflect on the issues. You're really advancing the best interest of the whole global humanity. And I really appreciate this little effort today.
So one more experience that I've had that frightened me really bad. And I thought I was going to do something bad, because there's a woman that has Tourette syndrome.
Oh, yes.
And I didn't understand this disorder. And she was using profanity, and she wanted to attack me. And I was getting ready to throw hands.
Yes.
I was like, who does she think she is saying all this stuff to me? But it wasn't directed towards me, but I didn't realize. It was for
had the same
everybody in the room.
In Chelsea, God bless, it happened on a bus in Chelsea, and the rest of the bus knew the circumstances.
Yeah.
And they told me, she has Tourette.
Yeah.
Slow down.
Right,
You
right,
don't
right.
have to respond.
Right.
But that's what I mean by community support.
Yeah.
Loving acknowledgement and support for this woman in her circumstances.
Yes.
And calling in me as a newbie in town
Yes.
to consider letting that go, giving the woman space.
Yeah. Because
No throwing hands.
right, but when that happened, like I said, I wanted to throw hands. But in that moment, I saw her, and I said, I've seen this woman before. I said, I don't want to go to jail, so I'm not going to hit her, because I don't know what it is. It could be something. Who knows?
It was a mystery.
Right. So I went to the police station, and I asked about this woman. And they said, Miss Williams, we know about her, blah, blah, blah. I said, thank God I didn't respond. Thank God that when she was doing all this, I said something is wrong, and I ran into a store to stay safe and gathered my thoughts. And
So when you see people acting out their mental health issues, it's wise to always find a safe position to be for yourself. First, make sure
But
you're
it's
in a safe
traumatizing.
position. It is traumatizing.
because I didn't want to
Okay.
come out my house for a few days, because this is what the situation is. The woman lives right around the corner from me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm not the only one that has experienced these things.
Yeah, so that's why
You
people
know?
are afraid, because it's in proximity to you. You see it acting out, and you don't see where the control is coming from. Will it happen and roll up on me? Okay, self-interest will reign. If people can be brave in those moments and do like you did, reach out, get some answers. I really was very impressed by the people on that bus that day who took the time to give me a clue. Okay.
And you know what people, that I talked to about it to heal? You know what they said to me? If you would have hit her, she wouldn't have done a day in jail because she has mental health. Do you think because a person, not just women like you said, overall, because they have mental health, you think that gives them a free pass to abuse people?
It does. No one has a free pass to abuse people, as we saw recently with the Oscars. And,
Oh, yes.
oh, yeah. But
That's
it
another
is possible-
conversation, yeah.
It is possible to understand, I think, deep in our souls, as individuals, we've all had moments where we could consider being the aggressor. Okay? So it's how we discipline and train and set boundaries to control ourselves that makes the difference in this scenario.
Yeah.
Back to your original question, no one has a past to be abusive, but being confronted with that abuse, with their abuse, how we handle them changes. Okay, we can't just, it's not as simple as locking them up until the episode passes
Right.
without treatment.
Right.
Okay, that's wishful thinking. And so when we see people resenting the social services network that's been built over the last 50 years
Okay.
to support people with mental health crises, I want to modify and explain to people the alternative is to leave them out in the streets, okay? And that we know doesn't work.
Right.
And that's how, for example, in Chelsea, that's how we created a major mental health agency. The people that actually came from East Boston to Chelsea.
Okay.
North Suffolk was started in response to the deinstitutionalization of people who had mental health issues.
Okay.
And community members said, we don't want our people left out like this.
Right.
Because those people who are with mental health challenges and acting out, they are family too.
That's right. And that's right. And that's what my training at school kicked in and said it's going to take the people that are well in the community to hold up the ones that are not well.
To support.
Yeah, for support. And I am loving this topic, and we are pressed for time.
Okay.
I love having you here, Miss Grace. You bring the knowledge, you also bring the strength, and we know that many women look up to you and adore you, and we're going to always love you up.
Well, thank you for
Because
that. Thank you.
you help us get through. And if there's any time that you need us to help you get through, you know that we're here, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So we're going to end this segment on women's mental health or mental health wellness overall in our community. If you are feeling any type of disorder or illness, I mean, like I said, I've gone through, such things in my life. If you can relate, take that self-inventory. Look inside yourself. Try to, see if there's something off about your own self. You have a doctor, talk to your doctor. There's plenty of resources out here that you can get to help you with whatever it is that you're dealing with. Whether it's family, a loved one, a child. Hopefully there's services and you seek it, right? So on that note, we're going to say what?
We're going to say goodbye, God bless, take care of yourselves, and remember, it's a big universe,
Yep.
and it's a long time.
Yes.
We're all going to be in the same
Yes.
boat together, so let's help each other out.
And remember, in 2022, we're still trying to take off that mask, and for some of us, it's a mental thing, and we're going to get through
I've
this.
got mine right here.
And I got mine right here. But I was scared to take it off, like I said, but here it is again, my face, and I'll see you next time on Inspiring Generations.